The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. Jesus said to his disciples, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in them bears much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. The Gospel of the Lord. Welcome to the final week of our Easter series. Easter celebrates the most extraordinary event in all of human history, Jesus' resurrection from the dead. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead has the power to raise up the dead parts of our own lives, the ordinary things that we wish weren't so ordinary. Over the last few weeks, we've been looking at some of the ordinary practices, connecting with other growing disciples, reading the Bible and applying it to our lives, and serving others in ministry or in outreach. These are all relatively ordinary things that all of us can do to open ourselves up to God's extraordinary power. As we wrap up today, we're going to look at a principle that underlines everything we've been talking about these past few weeks. And like everything we've been talking about these past few weeks, it's so simple. In fact, it is so simple that it's easy to miss. We're going to be looking at a passage from the 15th chapter of the Gospel of St. John. It was our Gospel today, so you can follow along in your missalette if you'd like. But here, Jesus is talking to his friends and his followers the night before he dies. This is part of his final words and instructions to them. And like any last will and testament, these words are going to carry some special weight. Jesus is trying to explain the relationship between him and us. Okay? So check it out. Here's what he says. I am the vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. So let's break this down a little bit. Jesus here is calling us the branches. We're meant to be connected to him, our main tree or vine, to gain our life from him, to have an intimate relationship with him, to be so close to him that we're part of the same unit, the same tree. So what's with the pruning then? Is God saying that if we're not bearing fruit, he's going to cut us off from himself? Well, think about it. If you're living in a close relationship with Jesus, then consider this a heads up. You're going to have some rough days. A relationship with Jesus makes life better, but it doesn't necessarily make life easier. Here, Jesus says that when you have troubles, don't think of it as God being against you or that he's mad at you, but remember that he's pruning you. He's cutting back the bad things in your life, and even sometimes the good things, so that you will bear fruit. He's cutting dead or harmful parts out of your character or sharpening the good things about you so that you can be an even better version of yourself. The pruning is not vindictive. It's constructive. Now, we know this, but still, in times of pruning, in times of conflict or trouble, we find ourselves tempted to run as far away from God as we can, or even to think that God has abandoned us. But rather than running away from God, that is exactly the time where we should be leaning into God, leaning into Him and ask, what are you doing? How are you pruning me and sharpening me? What's going on here? It is in those moments where we need to abide in Jesus. Here's what He says. We heard it today. Abide in me as I abide in you. Want to live an extraordinary life through the power of Jesus? Then abide in Jesus. We're going to break down what this means in a second, but first, let's look at the verses around this one, because there Jesus gives us the motivation for abiding in Him. Here's what He says. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in them bears much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. So, cut off a branch from a tree and nothing will be produced, right? You've cut it off from its secure source of nutrients and water. It no longer has the capacity to produce anything of value. Well, in the same way, Jesus is saying that if you cut yourself off from Him, you won't be able to produce any fruit. On the other hand, when we stay connected to Him, live in a relationship with Him, then we can produce fruit. Now, what kind of fruit are we talking about here? Well, the fruit means that we will grow. We'll grow personally and spiritually. We'll grow in things like patience and kindness, goodness and self-control, and even success. In other words, we'll live exactly the kind of life that deep down we want to live. On the other hand, Jesus says that apart from Him, we can do nothing. Nothing. If you've been living your life without a relationship with Jesus, you might end up thinking, well, I've done just fine without Jesus. Nice house, good family, decent job, I'm good. But I would actually argue that everything that is good in your life has actually come through Jesus in some way. You might not even know about that yet, but someday you will. Everything good in your life has come from the Lord. And for anything to really last and be of eternal value, you need to stay connected to Jesus. All the things of this world, all the gifts that we've been given by God, will be lost when we die if we do not stay connected to Jesus Christ. What is merely human is temporary, but what is divine is eternal and lasts forever. You see, whenever we invite Jesus into our lives, our activities can actually bear fruit that never ends. Without Jesus, we could do nothing of eternal or lasting value. Nothing. Nothing at all. Whatever we do with Jesus can last forever. We can do things that are extraordinary, that can make a true and lasting impact. And on this side of eternity, we won't even know the full extent of that impact. But there's more. Because Jesus goes on to say, whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. Ouch. If you thought that the "you can do nothing without me" verse was a bit harsh, well, Jesus was just getting warmed up. Now, of course, Jesus is not trying to threaten us here. He's just stating the truth, right? When a branch is cut off from the life-giving nutrients of its tree, it shrivels up and it dies. and so do we. When we are cut off from Jesus, our hearts and our souls are cut off from the life-giving sustenance of Him. And without Him, we shrivel up and we die. Now, personally, I've seen this in my own life. There are times when I stop making prayer a priority, and I get into a rhythm of ignoring prayer and ignoring God, and I get busy with work, and I get busy and busy and busy and busy, and after a while, I realize that my soul is shriveling up, and it's dry. It is less than what it used to be, and it is less than what it should and could be. So I can affirm to you today, as I stand before you, that Jesus is not threatening here. He's just telling the truth. He goes on to say, "If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." See, Jesus says if we stay connected to Him, we will pray, and stuff will actually happen. Our prayers will become very effective. We'll set and reach extraordinary goals because we will be living and connected to Him. Now, this doesn't mean to pray to win the lottery and you'll win, or pray that the Leafs will win the Stanley Cup and suddenly they will. Believe me, I've tried that. Okay? But it does mean that as we abide with Jesus, we'll begin praying prayers that align with God's desires. Okay? We'll have dreams and goals and desires that align with God's desires. In a sense, we'll be on the same wavelength as God. And we will have faith in Him to actually deliver for us. When we abide in Jesus, we'll learn to pray extraordinary prayers that glorify God, because only God can answer them. We'll do great things for God, not on our own power, but on His, because His life will literally be flowing through us. But to do all of this, we need to abide in Him, which begs the obvious question, well, what does it mean to abide in God? And how exactly do we do that? Well, to abide in Him means to stay connected to Him, like a branch stays connected to a tree. To abide means to stay connected. And the branch of a tree remains connected to the tree all the time. So to produce great fruit means that we're not just connected to Jesus once a week or once in a while, but we work to stay connected to Him every day and throughout the day. But how do we do that? Well, I actually think it's pretty simple. You schedule it. I mean, we schedule and plan every other part of our lives, don't we? You've got hockey practice and music recital and exams to write and a job to get to. We schedule all of that. So why not schedule time for God? Write God time on your calendar or on your agenda and actually do it. To abide in Jesus and remain with Him requires time. Time where you just sit and rest with Him. But what do you do during that time? You talk to Him. And then you wait for Him to talk to you. You talk, and then you listen. Maybe that means reading through Scripture and keep on going until a word or a phrase pops out at you. Maybe that means you take out a journal and you reflect on the past day, or you look towards the day ahead and you ask Jesus to give you some insight. Maybe it means you look up some great Catholic online devotional subscriptions that will send you a reflection every day to your email, and then actually open it and read it every day. To abide in Jesus means setting aside some time each day dedicated to Him alone. You spend time with Him, and you find a routine that works best for you. Now, some things don't work for everybody, and that's okay. So find something that works for you. Now, if you're just starting out this practice, I would not at all recommend setting aside a whole hour right off the bat to pray, because that could be a bit much, especially if you're not used to it. But just start with 10 minutes. Can you give God 10 minutes? Now, if you already have the habit of taking some God time, then look to extending that time, or look to making sure that you're actually focused on Jesus and only Him during that time, and not be distracted with other things. This kind of happens to me. I love praying my breviary on the phone. The breviary is a book of prayers that priests pray every day. We have to pray it 5 times a day. And it's a lot easier to pray it on the phone because you scroll versus flipping a lot of pages back and forth. So sometimes I like to pray that way because it's just simple. But then you get a text message or you get an email and it distracts you. Now I've left the focus that I had on that prayer and my mind goes somewhere else. Okay? So now I hit that little moon button on my phone and do not disturb, and I'm focused. So what's distracting you in your prayer? Okay? Is it music playing in the background? Is it something else, or your environment, or thoughts you have going on in your head? Cut out the distractions, and you'll have quality time. You won't be distracted. You can actually focus on Him. After having that initial and official time with God, the second way that we can abide with Him is to simply bring Him into everything that we're doing. Okay? So, if you're working out, just say, Jesus, be with me while I'm working out. If you're going to be stepping into a meeting, go ahead and say, Jesus, be with me as I step into this meeting. Are you getting ready to write an exam? Jesus, be with me as I write this exam. Ready for a big job interview that you need to ace and do really well on and get the job? Jesus, be with me as I go into this job interview. It's that simple, folks. At little times throughout the day, just invite Jesus into the day. In the past, they had church bells that went off every few hours of the day to remind people of their need to pray and to connect with Jesus. That's why bells ring in churches, to remind us to stop for a second and reconnect with the Lord and pray. Well, we can still remind ourselves with alerts. You can put an alert on your phone to remind you about Jesus, and you can actually pray that you remain connected with Him throughout the day. Jesus tells us to abide in Him, because apart from Him, we can do nothing. We cannot do anything of lasting value apart from Jesus. And apart from Him, our lives will be very ordinary. But when we spend time with Jesus, we'll have a greater vision for our life. Connecting, developing, and maintaining our personal relationship with Jesus will take us from an ordinary life to an extraordinary life.